Hello and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering EDH deck tech idea. Today we are taking a look at a deck that goes way too far in what it does, so stay tuned because today we are taking a look at Eshki, Temur's Raw. But before we jump into today's video, I want to make a shout out for Mythatom. Check out their high quality Magic the Gathering and other fantasy products via the link in the notes below and use my discount code LATSEL for 10% off your order. She's a commander from the Tarkir Dragonstorm Precons and is a free mana 2/2. She doesn't look like much, but she has a very powerful triggered ability. Because whenever you cast a creature spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on her. If that creature spell's power is 4 or greater, you draw a card, which is the main thing about this commander. And if that spell's power is 6 or greater, she deals damage equal to her power to each opponent. Which means that she combines a lot of things that we can use in Temur colors. First, she grows herself, she provides card advantage, and in addition to that, she brings a bunch of burn damage to the table. As we are in Temur colors and as we want to play a bunch of creatures that have very high power, we want to ramp in the early game. As we have green in our color identity, we have the most powerful spells that we can use to accelerate our early game. Which is why we play cards like Farseek to find our Triumph or to also find Surveillance. We can use Explore for an additional land drop and also to replace itself so we don't lose out on any cards but accelerate what we want to do. A really powerful turn 1 play is Utopia Sprawl. If we have a forest in hand and a follow-up land for our second turn, this means that we can bring out Eshki on turn 2. Kinda similar but not that strong is Wild Growth, but way more versatile because we can enchant any land with this one, not only forests. And as we are Simic based deck, we also have access to very powerful ramp spells. For example, Growth Spiral, a very powerful instant that lets us draw a card and put a land into play, which we can do in our opponent's end step, and in the worst case we still have 1 mana available simply because the land comes into play untapped, so we can still use something like Rapid Hybridization. Kinda a similar card is Planar Genesis. We can look at a few cards from our library, put either a land into play or a card of that into our hand, which provides great card selection or also accelerating our mana base. As Eshki is really cheap, we want to commit her early to the battlefield, but then we still have a few follow-up creatures that accelerate our game plan and also use Eshki's trigger to provide even more value. Which is why we play Erixmethri's Slumbering Isle. This creature is locked down for a few turns, but we don't care about that because we will first use it as a mana creature, and we also hit all of the necessary requirements to trigger Eshki in its full send. As we want to keep ramping, we also play Overlord of the Hauntwoods. We will just impend this card because Eshki's trigger cares about the creature spell's power and it doesn't care about the mana value itself. With that, we get an additional land in that turn to accelerate what we want to do on later. Another great card for this deck is Wayward Sawtooth because we can secure additional land drops and it also provides card draw with Eshki on the battlefield. As we have a bunch of spells coming up, we want to discount them with all of our creatures, so we play Temur Battlecrier, a creature that discounts all of our spells during our turn for each creature that we have on the battlefield with power 4 or greater. Let's keep ramping. Even though there aren't that many basic lands in this deck, we still play Topiary Stomper, because this creature will replace itself because Eshki will see a power 4 spell being cast and also draw a card with that. We also get another basic land to the battlefield to accelerate our mana base. Another powerful creature spell that will be used several times is Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. On ETB and on attack we can draw a card, gain 3 life and put a land into play, which is everything that this deck wants to do in a certain state of the game, and due to Uro having 6 power we will also get all of the triggers from Eshki. Along the way we want to commit powerful artifacts and enchantments to the battlefield, which we will use to win the game with. Starting off with even more card advantage and also a haste enabler is Temur Ascendancy. As we cast a bunch of powerful creature spells, we also play Up the Beanstalk, a really powerful enchantment that on ETB will replace itself, and afterwards we will profit from every spell with mana value 5 or greater. If you check out my full deck list in the notes below, you will see why this deck is so strong. Not only because it is based on a Simic color identity, but also because we play a bunch of Cascade and also Discover triggers. Which is why we play Monstrous Vortex. We play a bunch of powerful creatures, and if we are lucky enough we can chain several of those together, which all will individually trigger Eshki. As another haste haste enabler, or alternatively a great anthem enchantment, we play Rhythm of the Wild, also to protect our creature spells simply because they cannot be countered. To enable our final overrun, we also play Garruk's Uprising, another great card draw enchantment and also a trample enable. With Tarkir Dragonstorm we also got the Sieges, and Frostcliff Siege is definitely a banger in this one. Depending on the state of the game, we can either enable haste or trample with a nice little anthem, or even more card advantage if we need to. And now let's talk about the bomb creatures in this deck. As you have seen earlier, we either discount our spells or create a huge mana advantage, simply to cast spells like Apex Devastator for example. In combination with Monstrous Vortex, this can win you the game on the spot, simply because you are able to go through your whole deck with this one, and you might not even need to win with combat damage, simply because you can get a bunch of triggers from Eshki, which can also burn your opponents down. For even more free value, we also play Trumpeting Carnosaur, a great creature that is strong by itself and on ETB provides even more free value due to its Discover trigger. With Edge of Eternities, this deck got a bunch of creatures that are extremely powerful because of Warp. Warp is a discounted casting alternative that also exiles the creature afterwards, but the creature has no downside when it comes to power, so it can be an early full trigger from Eshki, which is why we play Anticausal Vestige. This is probably the card of the year for me already, and just by reading the card it explains why. Not only is it really powerful in Flicker decks, but also in this one because it constantly provides value, it can only be negated if your opponents counter this one. Another great creature if we already have Trample enabled is Starwinder. If this one is on the battlefield and we can connect with a few of our creatures, we will get so many cards that it will be hard for our opponents to catch up. To generate even more free value, we also want to cast Etali, Primal Conqueror. This card is feared in many formats and definitely for a reason. If we can hit even more creatures from our opponents, we will cast them with Etali, which will trigger Eshki again. And not only as a great haste enabler, but also to get even more free value with more cascade triggers, we play Maelstrom Wanderer. It provides haste for all of our creatures, and also we will get 2 additional cascade triggers. As you have already seen, a bunch of cards are featured which provide extra value by either Discover or Cascade, and this is why this deck is going to be so explosive. Your opponents won't see what is coming. And if you want to win even more games, here are a few cards that I have added to my list, which are extremely powerful in this one. Starting off with Shaman of the Great Hunt. It is a great haste creature which will constantly pump up our creatures if they connect, and it has inbuilt card draw for all creatures of power 4 or greater, which we are easily able to get a bunch of in this deck. Talking about even more card advantage but also additional burn, we play Dragonhawk, Fate's Tempest. I'm a huge fan of creatures that have entered the battlefield and attack triggers, and Dragonhawk does exactly all that. On ETB and on attack you will impulse a bunch of cards depending on how many creatures you have with power 4 or greater, and even if you don't use those spells, you will burn your opponents for each spell exiled with this one. When it comes to ramped decks that want to play a bunch of powerful creatures, Vaultborn Tyrant always finds a home. Not only does this card replace itself, but it's also really hard to get rid of because of its Leave the Battlefield trigger. My favorite sorcery removal spell is Contest of Claws. Over the course of the game you will get a bunch of powerful creatures, and with Contest of Claws you can provide even more extra value by discovering the excess damage if the targeted creature gets hit by this one, and even if you just find a counterspell, Discover still allows you to take that card to your hand. Talking about counterspells, we play Stubborn Denial. This is a powerful counterspell in the right deck because as soon as you have a creature with power 4 or greater, you have Ferocious enabled, which turns this one into a cheap basic counterspell. And last but not least, if your chain is big enough, you can play Chandra's Incinerator. Probably discounted for just 1 mana, this creature will keep the opponent's board in check, because if Eshki burns your opponents, you can still deal damage with Chandra's Incinerator to creatures they control. And with that, you clear the path for your final swing, and also use Eshki's trigger even more by burning your opponents and also their creatures. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I would play in Eshki, Temur's Raw. Let me know which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next. Make sure to check out my full deck list in the notes below, and then I would say see you in the next one. Goodbye.